Welcome to Digging Deeper. So glad you're with us to discuss those important, big headline making news events of recent times and trying to look at what they mean for us, sifting through all of the noise around them. Now, today, Joe Rogan, if you are watching this, you may well know who he is, listen to his podcasts, know why he's in such hot water at the moment. Just in case you don't, comedian, UFC commentator, podcaster. Well, he's been on record saying that he's not an anti-vax person, but he's been criticized for featuring an infectious disease specialist, banned from Twitter for spreading COVID-19 misinformation. Misinformation, is it one of the most dangerous things in our world at the moment? It appears so. So many people being cancelled for what is deemed misinformation. What is misinformation? What qualifies as being misinformation? And why should we be so scared of it? What is so dangerous about this misinformation? Now, Joe Rogan, he's come out defending himself. He's got a little clip where he says he's going to try harder to get people with different opinions on. He will do his best to make sure he's researched these topics, and if you listen to his podcast, it looks like he already does. But he's just trying to get, he claims, people with different opinions, highly credentialed people with different opinions out there. Okay? Is that a dangerous thing to do? Well, a few musicians have thought so. Neil Young, Johnny Mitchell, they've pulled their music from Spotify. Many users have unsubscribed, and the company has lost billions of dollars. Pretty significant. Now, despite this, Spotify are sticking with Joe Rogan. That may be because they've paid him a lot of money, reportedly $100 million. But, is that okay for musicians to say we are abandoning Spotify because we don't agree with what somebody has said on this huge platform? It seems interesting, doesn't it? Is there a bigger issue at play? Is it to do with what musicians are being paid on Spotify? It's already maybe a pretty controversial platform. An artist would make $1 per 315 plays of one of their songs. So a tough way for a music artist to make a living. The chief exec of Spotify has said, well, they're going to try and do better. They're going to put content advisories up for anyone talking about this COVID-19 issue, but they're not going to become a content censor. Other people are quite happy to censor information, but Spotify is saying they're not going to do that. Interesting. Does this compare to not putting signs up about dangerous crocodiles in nearby waters? Well, I guess Spotify are doing that. They're putting up the signs. Here is potential misinformation about COVID. They're not going as far as banning people from going near the water. Maybe that's an analogy that helps here, but it's interesting. Also, nearly 300 medical professionals are signing an open letter urging Spotify to stop enabling its hosted media to damage public trust in scientific research and sow doubt in the credibility of data-driven guidance. Now, that's an interesting statement in itself. Those doctors, some of them were proven not to be medical doctors. Is there misinformation about the misinformation? How deep does this go? Sowing doubt, though, I think that's the key phrase there. Misinformation sows doubt. And is doubt dangerous? If there's a life-saving medicine available and some doubt is sown about that, is that dangerous? I guess it depends on who is saying that medicine is dangerous. Are they qualified to question it? Well, in the case of this podcaster, he's featured Dr. Peter McCullough, maybe mispronouncing that, sorry, is a cardiologist, most published physician in his field in history, and Dr. Robert Malone, who owns 9 patents on the creation of mRNA technology. Seem like reasonable people to be listening to at least their opinion. But maybe that makes the misinformation all the more dangerous. So on his podcast, Joe Rogan's addressed this. He said he's interested in finding out the truth, and the way he does that, the way he approaches that, is he doesn't just talk to people who share his opinions. He tries to listen to a range of people. He says, well, I've had other guests who've had different opinions to these people who've been pro the COVID vaccination. So he's saying this is part of the conversation. In future, he thinks, well, I'll try and put these podcasts back to back so people can see the contrast. Misinformation. Is it too dangerous even to be out there with warning signs around it? These seeds of doubt. Now, I listened to my first Joe Rogan podcast just before coming on here to talk about it. Thought I'd better at least listen, and it was the one with Dr. Malone. And he says, this doctor, he wants to help people think for themselves. Think for themselves. Is that dangerous for people to think to themselves? He claims that he doesn't have any conflict of interest, that he's not, making any financial gain from what he's saying. It seems like that probably is true. He's been banned from Twitter. He asked the question, who's qualified to talk about this if he isn't? He's a key player in inventing this technology. Okay, now, looking at all of this, what can we learn? Well, I agree that information is incredibly powerful. Knowledge is power. And back in the day, before the internet, before social media, well, who had the control of the information? It was the wealthy, the powerful. They could tell the plebs whatever they wanted, and they had no choice really but to believe what they were being told. That's not the case now. It's a trickier time, and almost there's no one who controls all of the information. But more and more, it's the big tech companies, I guess, who are able to have some filter on what gets out. High-profile people still have sort of a big influence. We can see here a lowly YouTuber like me is not going to have anyone too worried about him, but people with a high profile, which get to the question of who can be trusted with this power over information. Can anybody be trusted? Probably not, and that's the problem. But can everyday people be trusted? Can we give responsibility to people like you and me to work this out ourselves? Or are we not skilled enough? Do we not have enough knowledge to figure things out? So we need to be given a clear, direct message from the experts. Interesting question. But then who are those experts? What gives them the authority? Those are the questions that start to be raised. What are their other interests? Do they really care about us? Now, whatever you think about these questions, the reality is we are today exposed to many different sources of information, often conflicting. It's confusing, and some of these sources of information are very powerful and very harmful. Wars can start, people can die, can cause mental illness, which I think proves the point that it matters what we listen to. And more than that, what we listen to regularly. Like, if we listen to something once, yeah, okay, we've got a different perspective. But if it's something we listen to quite often, every day, every week, that source of information we might initially disagree with, but it'll end up shaping our views in a powerful way, shaping who we are even. So those sources of information that we listen to often, I think that's where it becomes a really important thing for us to think about. Now more than ever, we need a stable source to come back to. Reliable information. A source that has a concern for me. And I wonder what that source of information is for you. Be very interested to know if you've found that. For me, I go to something that helps me get a bigger perspective than just right here and now, something a bit more timeless. The Bible, okay, speaks encouragement to who I am. Here's some of the things the Bible says around this issue, for example. So it says, the first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. How true is that? That we listen to something, it sounds right until we've got another point of view, and then we're not so sure. That thing that sounded so right initially, it's being called into question. Something else. Lord, we know that you'll protect the oppressed, preserving them forever from this lying generation, even though the wicked strut about and evil is praised throughout the land. What if you see that lies, that evil is all around us? And I take comfort in the fact that those that are overlooked are not missed by God. One more thing. Lazy people consider themselves smarter than 7 wise counselors. And that brings me to a few other learnings around deciphering, getting through this whole topic of where we get information from and misinformation. One of those things that I think is important is we're not lazy. We can no longer afford to be lazy about where we get information and the way we process it. We've got to, unfortunately, check things out. If we don't, we're going to be led astray. Secondly, of course, we've got to ask if the people that are giving the information know. Do they have any knowledge about the area, and do they care about me? 2 important questions. What are their motives? We can ask that question. Another thing is go to the primary source. Go to the person speaking, not just what is said about them. So I went to listen to the actual podcast to hear the voices for myself, not just to read news reports about this, because the more layers back we go, I think the more chance for information to be twisted for other purposes. And these issues, unfortunately, they're not often black and white. So if a source of information is presenting something so clear and so clean, then that's a sign that it probably does contain some misinformation. If somebody is telling you this is the way it is, often we find out later down the track it's not the way it is, and we could call into question, why are you being told to say this, and by who? So maybe that's helpful. I'd be interested to hear very much what are some of your thoughts about deciphering all the information around us today, because what we do now is important. It shapes our future. Our actions will decide whose voices are elevated, who we listen to repeatedly. That gives that person, that source of information, more power, more listeners, and therefore, I don't think anyone can be completely trusted with that level of power. I think, yeah, I'll say no more about that. But a question for us: what sources do you spend the most time listening to? What sources, and what is that source for you that you go back to? And I think for me, God cares. I know that. I know that He knows, He sees, and for me, He's the ultimate source of life. And I try to go to His word first and last when I'm trying to look at all the information around us. Hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you for watching right the way through, and appreciate it. Yep, listening to a small show like this. It's about community, and love to hear your thoughts as well, because, well, I don't have all the answers. I think you can tell that. But hope to see you next time. And if you've got any suggestions about topics you'd like me to address, what are the big news issues that you're finding perplexing, let me know. See ya.